Hey, I'm Jeff Baumgartner with Light Reading. I'm joined by Alan Breznick, also with Light Reading.
What a coincidence.
Yes. We're here in New York to talk about cable business services, and this is the 13th year.
Lucky 13.
Yeah, for Cable Next Gen Business Strategies.
Right.
And I guess the name has changed, but it's been a long-running event. You've seen a lot take place over this time.
Right.
Now, but for the 13th year, I want to talk a little bit about what the big takeaway was today. I thought just the general idea of cable operators having to diversify,
Right.
and explore new verticals was like a big topic.
Right. Yeah, especially and some of the new verticals are really interesting, like e-gaming. I hadn't even heard that much about that before, but it sounds like Comcast, Mediacom, and a bunch of others are really looking at working with universities and setting up the whole infrastructure for e-gaming, which could be pretty interesting if they can get the speeds and up and the latency down to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm. Right, and then IoT, kind of the opposite, right? You don't have to worry as much about latency or super high bandwidth for some of these IoT monitoring things, so they're looking at that too. But as you kind of take that all in, I mean, it seems like the driver for all that is that part of the business has gotten so large that the rate of growth starts to slow because the numbers gotten so big.
Right.
And so, what other verticals are you going to be keeping closer tabs on?
Well, it sounded like they mentioned IoT. Some people mentioned wholesale and manufacturing, which was kind of interesting. Other things with higher speed and lower latency. Some people mentioned a renewed focus on financial services. Some people mentioned more education and government. It's going to be interesting to see. There's probably going to be something that emerges that nobody's even thought about.
That's for year 26 of doing this. Yeah. There'll be some crazy thing we never even thought of. SD-WAN was a big focus here again, and it seems like that opportunity seems to speak to kind of the move-up market to mid-size, but also enterprise level. But still seems like it's still pretty early on, some concerns, but very core to the path forward, right?
Yeah, it seemed that way. I mean, Comcast certainly sees a lot of opportunity there, and Charter Spectrum Enterprise sees a lot of opportunity there. I think the question is whether cable has can compete with the telcos in providing the SD-WAN capabilities and the bandwidth for it. I think there's still some questions about that.
The other questions that seemed to come up, that came up was despite some of the efforts of MEF, were standardization around SD-WAN, and the idea is like, well, if you want to, they were talking about overlay networks, underlay networks, and saying, well, on the underlay side, if you have somebody coming in that isn't using the equipment and setup that you're using on your own network, you have to kind of set up something else. So I mean, that's just one of the things that kind of came up that's a concern.
Right. That despite the efforts towards standardization, there still isn't enough standardization going on. Yeah.
Definitely need more of it. And then every year, I think for 13 years, we've talked about HFC versus fiber, and still, even though it's the same question 13 years later, it seems like it's a more complicated answer.
Yeah, and it seems like it shifted. I mean, before the cable people used to at least make a brave attempt at saying that HFC could compete with fiber, and now they don't seem to be debating it anymore. It's like definitely fiber wins. Whenever it's a green field, we're going to put in fiber. We're going to make an attempt with DOCSIS 4.0 and 10G to make coax better, but in the end, fiber's better.
Yeah, it just seems like it just depends on the scenario they're talking about. If HFC can handle it, yes. We're not going to rip it out.
Yeah, we're not going to rip it out, right.
Yeah.
The one operator had talked about that they are actually, Cable One talked about how they're actually sacrificing some of their HFC network to put in new fiber. I don't think I've heard cable operators say that too much before.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of the exception, rather than the rule, but an exception nonetheless. Yeah. And the other thing that we just, here towards the end, we talked, the enterprise opportunity, still very small piece of cable's business, but was it Greg? Yeah, he was talking about how important mobile is going to be to the cable guys if they're going to truly create a large or a scalable enterprise business. It's almost like if you don't got mobile, you don't got nothing.
Right, and that was interesting. I don't think we've heard a projection of what the mobility opportunity is for cable and business services and enterprise services before.
Right. And you know, the idea that if cable operators are going to be serious about mobile and applying that to the enterprise business, they got to come up with their own network essentially, or to get a lot more owner's economics for a couple of reasons. Some of the MVNO deals can't be extended.
Right.
You know, they're prevented from extending it to the enterprise business. You know, for one, which is a showstopper right there. But I think Greg talked about some, you know, some opportunities that could come up. CBRS, he thinks the Charter is going to jump in the game and you know, maybe bid on some spectrum.
Yeah, he had some pretty bullish projections, both about CBRS, about mobility, and about enterprise and cable in general. He sees it growing from a close to a $20 billion market now to $27 billion, I think, in 2023, 2024.
Yeah, so I heard some new numbers today. So when we look to year 14 in 2020, you know, we know what the big takeaway was here, you know, but what do you think it's going to be next year?
It's interesting. What will be the big takeaway next year? I think they'll be talking about some new services, some new. I think we'll hear a lot more talk about e-gaming and what the opportunities are. There'll be I think we'll hear a lot more about CBRS and how cable operators are starting to use CBRS and other wireless spectrum for business services. And hopefully we'll hear a lot more specifics about SD-WAN and future flavors of that, and how that's coming along for the big operators.
Yeah, and if I had to take a guess, and maybe I'm saying this just because it's kind of fresh in my mind because we just heard it, and that is, I think we're going to see some new or kind of an evolution or some changes and alterations to cable's mobile strategy. And you know, maybe not just Charter, maybe Comcast, you know, look at the owner's economics, because I think the writing's on the wall if they want to really pursue and go scale up marketing to hit the enterprise.
Okay, so you think Comcast may lead the way on that?
I think Charter will probably be a little bit ahead, but I guess I can make a prediction that Comcast is going to take a look at that too, the CBRS stuff.
And it'll be interesting to see what Cox does as well, right?
Right, yeah, because they used to actually be ahead of everybody with respect to mobile. Remember, one time they were building their own mobile network, and you know, decided that didn't work out. So yeah, we'll have to see, you know, if they look at it again, how they'll try to angle their way in there. Maybe work with a Sprint, you know, depending on how the T-Mobile thing shakes out. We'll see.
And I think also it would be interesting to see one of the number 5 to number 10 players, to see what they decide to do with mobile, like a Cable One or a MediaCom or something, or a WOW, or RCN, see what they do. So one of them is going to do something in the next.
Yeah, they got to jump in some way. I'm just not sure how. Yeah. So, all right. Well, Alan, congratulations. 13 years down, maybe 13 years to go.
Oh my God. 2033.
Yeah, we'll be there.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.